Hi, Rayne. How are you today?
Hey, Kathy. Good to chat to you as always.
Good.
I'm good. I'm good. It's a beautiful autumn day in South Africa. Suddenly, autumn was switched on, my favorite time of the year. So yeah, I'm good.
And
How
I'm
are you?
in spring. I'm heading into spring now. So we
Yeah.
got rainy days and it's getting warmer, but we had snow 2 days ago. So
Ah,
I'm in Rochester, New York, which is
so
near
much for
Lake Ontario.
spring.
My screenshot behind me is the Niagara River. Sorry, the Niagara River. Gosh, the Genesee River going up north.
Mm,
Here you see the Coast Guard station, and then the lake is
mm,
out there where all the fog is over there.
mm.
So that's Lake Ontario. And my favorite place to be is out on the lake. So it's fun. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah. So were you born in South Africa?
Yes, yes, yes. I was born in a place called Grahamstown, which is in the eastern part of South Africa. And by the age of one, we moved to a little village called Heidelberg,
Hmm.
where I spent, my parents lived there all their lives. I spent my childhood there, went to boarding school, but born, bred, raised, spent a few years overseas in the UK and in Europe. But yeah, this is home, very much so.
And you're in Cape Town now, right?
I live in Cape Town now, yes. Most beautiful city in the world, which I hope you will visit very soon.
I hope so too.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Were you born and bred in that area as well?
I was born in Buffalo, Buffalo, New York,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
home of the Bills and the Sabres and the sports teams. Was surprised when I moved to Rochester that they follow the sports teams as closely as the Buffalo Buffalonians, right? So yes, I was born in this area, but I moved away. I lived in Denver, Colorado for a little while, Aurora, Colorado. I lived in the Washington D.C. area for a little while. Always looking and to find what was right for me. Um, and I when I moved back to Buffalo, I said I'll never leave again, and then found a job in Rochester and moved here. Uh, 30, gosh, 30, 1992. How's that?
Mhm.
33 years ago. Um,
It's
so
so frightening, when someone says 95 or 2000, it's like it's the other day. It's 30 years ago. I mean, I had my 40-year um, school reunion last year. It is a frightening thought.
yeah, I know, right? Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, one of the things that we were going to talk about today was the things that people don't talk about, right? Like religion. So
mm.
you want to start there? You might as well jump in. Or do you have something else
Gosh,
to say?
yeah. So, the particular socio-political history of South Africa with apartheid that was greatly fueled by religion.
Yeah,
So we have what is called the Dutch Reformed uh, Church, where most Afrikaans people belonged to one or other denomination within that Dutch Reformed or the Reformed or newly Reformed or whatever church, which very, very dogmatic and pragmatic, and very much, an advocate for apartheid. It was written in the Bible. There was no doubt about it. So we grew up with this indoctrination of sin and dogma. Went to church religiously, Sunday mornings and often most Sunday evenings as well. And it was hell and damnation and brimstone and sin, and yet the biggest sin in our midst was never acknowledged. Um, and I mean, some people still cling on to that. Religion is a very big part of the culture in South Africa. So the Dutch Reformed for Afrikaans people, Methodist, Baptist, um, or Protestant churches for English people, and then all the different African religions. And of course, Catholicism plays a very big role because so many Catholic missionaries came out to South Africa to, tame the savages. I mean, we can talk about that for days on end, what Catholicism has done in Africa. But that's not my place. I'll talk about me. So I grew up in a very Afrikaans, very Dutch Reformed household, and so much so that after school I went to Stellenbosch University to study theology. I was convinced that I wanted to be a Dutch Reformed minister. I also was very interested in religion as a philosophy. I still am. It intrigues me. But in my second year of study, the lights went on, and I think also coming out of the closet, I was sort of put under the spotlight of the theological seminary, and was politely asked to leave because of my sexual orientation.
Mm.
Um, so I packed my bags and went to Europe. So at the age of 19, being very religious, very confused, um, basically, admitting to myself for the first time that I'm gay, I found myself in Europe. And I think that's where my education started, where I started reading and exploring and um, became more and more interested in spirituality, and have read anything from the autobiography of a yogi uh, through to Sufism and theosophy, and had some wonderful masters along the way, to bring me to this point where I realized, interestingly, when you said, is that I have not spoken about my spirituality or my world of spirituality in years. It's just not something that, as you say, that we talk about. So
Right.
I've come a very, very, very long way from, and as we just said, it is 40 years later. So had a very wide and fascinating journey towards the place where I am now.
Mm. It's fascinating.
How about you? Did you grow up religious?
Grew up Catholic, very
Oh,
Catholic.
yes, you said, yeah.
I would say classic American Catholic family. My mother was very religious. My father was not, but I didn't really realize it at the time.
Mhm.
As a child, I didn't know. We went to church every Sunday. My mother went to church more often. Um, and my uh, my shift, I went to 8 years of Catholic school. Um, and then my sister went to Catholic high school, and my other sister went to public school because she started out at the Catholic school. It was all girls, and she didn't like it. And so my parents allowed her to go to public school. So by the time it came to me, I had the choice of going to public school or Catholic school, and I chose where the boys are. So
Good for you.
so I chose where the boys are. And so I went to public school and it was early on in my first days of public school in ninth grade. I was probably 14 years old. I was walking to school and I saw a girl that was in my homeroom class walking right by my house. And I said, you know, you want to walk together? And we got to know each other. Um, and found out that she was Jewish. And I had never met a Jewish person before. And I thought, oh my goodness. I said, does this mean that you don't believe in Jesus? And she said something like, well, we know that Jesus was alive, but, you know, we don't think that he's like the savior of the world. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I said, does that mean that you won't go to heaven? And she's, you know, here I am just spouting it out, right? But she handled it well, 14-year-old girls, right? And she said, she must have like had the experience before or something. But she said, no, no, my mother says we're going to be okay, you know, that there's no,
Mm.
you know, that doesn't happen. And I said, okay. So I went home that night and I said to my mother, Mom, Karen's Jewish. Does that mean she's not going to be able to go to heaven? And my mother said, no, no, Karen will be okay. Karen will be fine. And I thought, wow, 8 years of
Mm.
Catholicism, and now Karen's going to be just fine. I was like, wow, this is really strange, you know? This is really strange. Well, then, not long after, my next door neighbor, we learned was getting a divorce. And I said, oh my goodness, does that mean, you know, she's not going to be able to go to heaven? And my mother said, no, no, she'll be fine. So I started taking it all with a grain of salt, right?
Mm.
And you gotta, you know, you gotta love my mother. She was just a loving, giving, loving person. You know,
Mm.
nothing bad could fall upon anyone. You know, she was
Yeah.
just a loving, loving woman. And um, by the time I got to college, I was so curious, and I started studying. I took a course in Buddhist philosophy, and I loved it. And I was like, wow, I could, you know, pretty much take my whole brain out, shake it up, and put in new things. And was just enamored by that ability and started
Mm.
studying more and more. And then I started following the, you know, the Wayne Dyers of the world and the people that were, you know, talking about this spirituality without religion,
Mm.
and studied all of them and learned so much over the years and kept reading. And I was on and off with it. You know, I would get involved in my work and you know, just focus on working and my work life. And but I would always come back to it. Like I'd meet a
Mm.
person that was into it and say, here, read this book. And then I read the Celestine Prophecy and I was back, you know, and I
Mm.
so and then I did started doing things like my brother, I introduced my brother to some of these ideas and he was just taken by it. And he said, oh, Kathy, you've got to do this past life regression. And
Mm.
and I was in my we were both in our 20s and I was like, I'll do it. And we did it with this local guy. I was still in Buffalo at the time. And, you know, I had this experience of being another person in another place. And I was in what came of it was I was in South America somewhere. And the first thing they had us do was look at our feet. And my feet were a man's feet. And they were the skin tone was darker than mine, but not a black person. It was just like a bronze brown person. And and that like sent me into a whole nother world of thinking and possibilities, right? All the possibilities, and it all became endless. So I just kept, you know, reading and reading and reading. And that's, you know, similar to you. Interesting that you said that you wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a nun when I was in Catholic school. The nuns came and talked about being a nun and how beautiful it is and what a beautiful life it is. But I went home that day and I said, Mom, I think I want to be a nun. And she said, No, you don't. Again, my mother was a
Mm,
beautiful influence on my life. She was just a beautiful person and loving and
mm.
caring. I don't ever remember my mother ever doing anything wrong. I mean, she would get angry with us kids, but she'd get over it.
Wow.
So yeah, so I've like opened my mind to all different kinds of possibilities in religion, and then started wondering why. And this is a question. I'm going to turn this into a question for you to ponder. Wondering why, um, why do people sit in their religion so strongly that they actually go against their own religion? Because most religions are about love and loving one another. Um, and I've always looked at finding, the common core of religions, and that's where I find it. Why are they fighting each other? What what is what is happening? Why are we finding ways to other each other?
Well, I think that's your answer. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that it's a deeply um, rooted psychological issue, and it is about othering.
Yeah,
Um, and I've been listening to some fascinating podcasts. I'll share one with you that I listened to yesterday about how the whole world is set up in in opposites, male, female, black, white,
the
weak,
duality.
strong,
Yeah,
the
duality.
duality, yeah, and and how deeply rooted it is in everything, male, female, and why this whole thing where people now come out as non-binary or
Mm.
gender neutral is so frightening for the average thinker who is stuck in these dualities and binaries and opposites. So there's a big power element to othering. There's a lot of fear involved in othering. Um, and yeah, I think that people base their standing or their being in the world on this othering, um, which is tragic because the more you move away from that, the more you become aware of the beautiful complexity of the um, structure of nature, the very you know connectedness of everything, the deep, deep connectedness of everything in the universe. I often hear people say to me, "Oh my God, you don't believe in astrology." And so, I don't believe in astrology. Like African people don't believe in their ancestors. They don't, it's not like idolatry that they pray to their ancestors, but they have a very, very deep knowing of the presence of their ancestors and the role that ancestors play. Um, however you want to narrate that, as from the astral plane or from previous lives or whatever, but the interconnectedness. Um, and what I found so interesting in my research was the interreliability. Um, that we all rely on each other for our being in the world. And that what we see in terms of disease, and I think very much so with with something like dementia is a disconnect, and that a lot of the anger and what we see in the world is a result of going against the interconnectedness and the interreliability and the reciprocity of this mystical um, cosmos of connection. That everything is interreliant and interdependent and interconnected, and that we are all part of this sacred being in the world.
Yeah.
For me, there is this, whatever you want to call it, again, God mind, God spirit, um, but that we are a constant becoming of the sacredness. And why I think what is happening, what we spoke about earlier, and it's not only in America, it's all over the world, it is so frightening, because it does feel a little bit that things are spinning out of control. Um, but I think that is why it is so important for all of us. When I turned 50 10 years ago, I had my first tattoo in collaboration with my godchild, who on her 18th birthday went for a tattoo against her parents knowing, and were very, very upset when they found out. And I said, okay, I'll have one with you. And to the surprise of all my friends, I had a tree of life tattooed on my calf. And within that, very intricately, you can't see it, you just see it, the tree of life. But if you look closely, within it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." And all my friends said to me, "But we thought you're not religious anymore." I said, "I'm not religious at all." But for me, that is one of the sacred truths, um, is to know, not, a lot of people talk about belief. For
Mhm.
me, the more one becomes aware of our divine connectedness, the more we know. That's why I say I don't believe in it. I believe in chocolate. I believe in red wine. I believe in good coffee. But I know that I am part of the divine. I am a manifestation. I am the concrete manifestation of the divine. And as such, I have a duty here, you know, what we spoke about in Eden, Tikkun Olam, to make this world a better place. What else would the purpose of my being be?
And
So
that
that knowing,
and that is the purpose of everyone. In other words, it's not just that you believe that you are a,
no, 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 no,
a
no, no.
part, that
Every
you know that
single,
every single being on this earth is a part
yeah,
of that tapestry of
yeah.
this, right?
Yeah. So there were, there's a lot of talk in South Africa about the extinction of the white rhino. And I read a fascinating article that said, yes, of course, the extinction of the white rhino would be devastating, but the impact that that has on the ecological system of all the other creatures and parasites and whatever, birds and things that are dependent on the white rhino. So it is that divine connectedness of all the species. We all have a purpose to keep this planet together, and what we are doing to the planet is frightening. Um, but yeah, it is not just I am God. It is we are collectively, we are God, God mind.
So that's one of the things that scares people, I think, a lot is when a person says, I am God or I am. the divine,
mm,
because um, they in the duality mindset, I think that you are that people that do that are saying that about themselves. But what we have a responsibility to do when we say something like that is, I believe that you are as one also. We are all
mm,
individual parts of the divine, just like every drop of water
mm,
is a part of the ocean, right? Um, so it scares people, is what I'm getting at.
yeah.
People that don't think like that don't there are people that don't even have the opportunity to take a moment to start thinking outside of where they are, right?
Mm,
Um, they don't know they have the opportunity.
mm,
They don't have the experience of someone saying to them, you can think your own thoughts. You have,
mm,
you know, it's true. I mean, people go through an entire lifetime without realizing that they can um, they can consider they can set aside their current beliefs and put it in a package over here and think about something else for a little while and then choose to go back to their original beliefs when they're done thinking about something else. I learned that at very young, so I was lucky to have had that. I call it a gift to be able to consider other things. And it goes right back to saying, Karen is going to be okay. The girl that is Jewish,
mm,
um, that for 8 years or all my life had been taught that she's not going to be able to go to heaven because she doesn't believe in Jesus as her savior. And now all of a sudden, my mother says to me, she's going to be okay. She'll be able to go to heaven.
mm,
And it's like, it exploded my world and my thought. And I got to the place where I believed in and found that interconnectedness of everyone, that we all have the opportunity to go to heaven if we want to use that language for simplicity,
mm,
right? Um, that we all are already in a divine world here, that this is um, and what I believe is that everything is happening as it should. Even when we see the horrors and the insanity of the world right now, um, history shows that there has been insanity before, and we work our way through it. And so I prefer to take a bigger picture view on those things, and try to see it as that it is as it should be, that there is going to be an unfolding of something important that has to go through this. Um, we have to go through this period of time or period of because if you understand if we look at it, there are people, and I'm going to talk politics for a moment in the United States, where there are people that think that everything that is happening is wonderful. There are, half of the country voted for this stuff to happen, whether they,
mm,
maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But there are people that are perfectly fine with all the things that are going on. And then there are people that are scared out of their wits. So I'm I'm optimistic that it's all going to sort itself out and that
mm,
we're all going to be okay. But I won't let it go to the point where some people are very pessimistic and saying that we're headed toward another Holocaust, and I would never stand for anything close to that. So I'm
mm.
I'm I'm planning to do my own things to stand up for what I believe in. And that would be, helping people. You know,
Mhm.
my purpose in life, I have learned through all of my study and all of my work together with all of the things I've done, and many varied things I've done throughout my life, is my purpose is to love people and help people. Simple and um, not simple at the same time, right?
Mhm.
But the open
Yeah.
mindedness of being able to listen to different ways of thinking is important. We, I feel that I am called. I can't say we all have to do this, but I will say that I am called to listen to various ways of thinking and opening my mind to all different kinds of ways to live your life. And some of it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I often think, um, what will I stand for?
Yeah.
Um, I've never in my life had the desire to protest. And I think, I think there's an absolute place for it. And I'm for the first time in my life advocating, saying to my American friends, you have to take to the streets. You have to do like they do in France, where they take truckloads of cow shit and dump it in front of the parliament buildings,
Yep.
literally dump the shit on them. Um, I always think, ooh, that's hard work. But for me, and you and I have spoken about this before, is the power of the circle of influence. Um,
Oh, yes.
and I find that I spend more and more time in my garden. Um, Suddenly have an obsession with houseplants. And I realize it is creating, contributing to this equilibrium, this little cosmos. Um,
It's the microcosm that is your life.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Where I need to water my garden, and I had to find something this week to chase the molds without killing them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a garlic paste that seems to have chased them. I don't know where. They're certainly going to pop up somewhere else. But yeah, just something else that you said that made me think. I remember as a first year student of theology really grappling with this Holy Trinity business,
Mm,
the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit,
yes.
typical of that dogma, there was no sign of the feminine.
Yeah.
It was just a very masculine, patriarchal, patronizing, um, system. But thinking to myself, of water, flowing water, steam and ice. You talked about the drops in the ocean, and that it all has the same substance. It's all H2O,
Right.
but very different um, textures.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just, it was just an interesting way for me to get my head around that. And then, realized there were so many things that I couldn't get my head around. But I was listening to a wonderful comedian the other day. I forget her name. It was talking about, the Catholic religion, and said, just don't bother Jesus. you know. You can speak to the saints and you can speak to the, all the different deities out there, but just don't bother Jesus, And if all else fails, you can go to Mary, but just, don't bother Jesus. Like, I mean, we went straight for Jesus,
Yeah,
and
that's funny.
everything was either his responsibility or his fault,
Right?
Um, but yeah, I think there's a big need for people also to simplify. And what I find for me now, and it's a wonderful thing of aging, and I hope a little bit of wisdom and insight, is just exactly how simple it is. Um, it's very, very simple. We are all divinely connected, and we all have an essential role. Without the bees, the world will collapse. It will absolutely collapse. Um, and we as human beings so often think, we are the jewel in the crown.
Yeah, we're the center. Yes, and
Yeah,
we're certainly not, right? We are so dependent on everything else. Complete
exactly. I think
dependence and
bees are more important than us. Um, a dung beetle is more important than us and do more good than most humans put together. Um, so I think also it's about perspective, but it only comes, this is the thing about the back to the tattoo, this be still.
yes.
Where I'm sitting at the moment is there's a beautiful um, dam with so much bird life, incredible bird life. There are finches and heron and all sorts of different birds, and to hear the silence. Um, and I think, as you were saying earlier about people who do not think outside, um, I often use the saying, the wheel is turning, but the hamster is dead.
Oh,
Um, You can see this incredible pace at which everything is moving, but it's not moving forward. It's just moving for the sake of moving,
just moving in circles.
um, moving in circles. Yeah, but the divine, So that's I think something that intrigues me more and more is the divine mysticism, um, which we are so desperately trying to debunk, and what science is so desperately trying to make a database or to um, have an explanation, to be still within the knowing of the not knowing.
Yes. Do you know, are you familiar with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi that did
I,
created the transcendental meditation? He probably
mm,
didn't create it, but
mm,
he brought it to the
mm,
forefront. I guess the Beatles, right? Um, but they did, his organization did a lot of studies on meditation, and they actually did like group meditations and found that during the time of the group meditation, the crime wave went down. Like they did timed, when crimes are happening in a city and they put a group together in the city and did this giant mass meditation. And then um, the crime rates, you'd see a little dip in the
mm.
during that time of the meditation. They've done a lot of studying. I need to look deeper into it. But it it makes a difference. We make a difference. And
Mm.
I meditate every morning. Um, and used to meditate more, um, and found that, um, so many people say, oh, I'm not good at meditation. It's fascinating to me. I'm not good at it.
mm,
Um, there's nothing to be good at.
mm,
It's just that stillness. And so, um, but I can't sit still for 10 minutes. Well, can you sit still for 5? Well, I can
mm,
try, right? So anyway, yes, I'm finding that I've learned now that there are more ways to reach that, um, higher consciousness, than just meditation. There are ways that you can seek to reach a higher consciousness. Um, and going back to that, past life regression that was I did in a group. I've now learned how to do that work,
mm,
and have found, um, that um, we can reach our subconscious mind, and our subconscious mind, um, has all of that oneness that you're talking about. The There's a really cool, there's a movie called Men in Black. It's a comedy, alien,
mm.
fun, very fun movie. I think Dan Aykroyd is in it. Who's in it? I don't know. Um, I probably got the wrong actor, but the movie was fun and funny, and about aliens coming to Earth, and that they're all over and they're among us. And but at the end of the movie, I wish I had just that section, and it's probably on YouTube at this point. Um, the movie ends, and then the the Earth, like they show the what's happening, and then the camera goes out, and it shows the Earth, makes the Earth about the size of a marble, right? And then it goes out through the galaxies, and then it goes out further and further and further, and then all of a sudden it becomes a bigger marble, right, with the Earth as a tiny marble inside the marble. And then it goes, even bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden there's this giant creature that is a an alien looking creature, and he's got this marble, because to him the size of this marble inside the marble inside the marble is a marble. And he's, playing marbles with other aliens, and just, sort of flicks the marble
Mm,
that is us inside of it, right? And we're the tiniest speck inside of this giant, which is now small because it's all relative, right? But to me, that just that little, it's like maybe a 1 minute, thing that happens at the very end of the movie that probably no one pays much attention to. It's so profound, because we are small. We think that we're the center of the universe, and we are not. And,
mm.
um, we are our life and our lifetime is a small speck in this whole, macrocosm, I'll say, of life. You know,
And billions and billions and billions of light years. And
and
um,
yes, all of it, right? And we're out there trying to discover it,
mm,
and seeing the most incredible things with our technology, beautiful pictures coming. But all of that energy out there is a part of, it's all a part of who we are, right? So we can go,
oh,
and then in
yeah.
the other direction, you can go inside of yourself, right? That's outside of yourself, but you can go inside of yourself. It's just like the deepest parts of the ocean are as deep as the, farthest parts of the sky. And inside of ourselves we can find that stillness, that oneness, and you can actually feel that oneness with all of the universe just inside of yourself, because there's a depth that most people never see, and that
And it's right there.
I'm still seeking it, right?
Mhm. And it's right there.
It's right there.
Mhm.
It's right there.
I had a funny thought when you were talking about, you know, the crime rate dropping while all the people are meditating. Sadly thought, oh, I hope it wasn't the people who were meditating who were doing the crime that suddenly it dropped while they're meditating.
Why? We put all the criminals in the room to do the meditation.
No,
That's brilliant.
no wonder the crime rate dropped
Yeah.
suddenly. Um, you see, I think one of the things that, yeah, is impact. You know, um, that we have such impact on our own being in the world, on other people's being in the world, and that's where our and there's a lot of there are a lot of truths, sort of universal truths in the Bible. One of them being our covenant with the earth. Um, that we have a we yeah we spoke about that. Um, and that thing of be still and know that I'm God, that it's right there.
It's right there. It's right there.
Yeah. I always say, sitting on a mountain top in a cave meditating is one thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, having to navigate the traffic in Cape Town is another thing.
Right. That's right.
Um,
There-
I'm always intrigued by our being in the world. Not our doing in the world, but our being in the world, our presence, our divine being in the world.
So, yes, and we impact the world, whether in small ways or large ways. And I, as we're growing up, we all want to impact the world in big ways, right? I think that most people have this sort of, you know, what am I going to be and how am I going to impact the world? Um, am I going to be a cog in the wheel, or am I going to step out and make a difference? And you have to really admire the strength of people that really step out to make a difference. And I think that you're one of those
Mhm.
people. I think that you have made a huge difference in the lives of so many people that are in elder care. So can you just move there for just a moment to let people know how your work started in elder care and where you've grown that to?
Yeah, I realized that it was just one of those things of being that it was never a conscious decision. It wasn't a career choice. Um, I found myself at the age of 30. Um, Gosh, again, it's 30 years later.
Yeah.
I found myself completely down and out at the age of 30. And a friend of mine said, there's a position in a retirement village as the kitchen manager. And I said, yeah, I can do that. I love food. I can do that. Been around chefing and doing all sorts of things up until then, by default, all of it. And found myself as the kitchen manager in a retirement home and thought, oh my God, what has my life become? I'm now that old lady in the pink nylon coverall, you know, slopping up food. That was the image that I had in my head.
Right.
It
Sure.
was a very upmarket retirement home full of expats. But still, it was like the last thing that I could envisage. And then after a few months, they asked me to stay on, and I realized I like what I do. I like being around old people. Ah, it's familiar. Yes, I grew up amongst old people, older persons. And before I knew it, I was heading up a few retirement homes, nutritional services, employed dietitians, started looking at research, realizing the importance of optimal nutrition for older and vulnerable persons. And it became a business. And, 30 years later, that's what I do. We're the only company in South Africa that focuses exclusively on the needs of older persons in residential care. Um, and my interest just grew, through the Eden Alternative, through research, through doing my PhD in dementia studies, through trying to change the narrative around aging, through trying to change the institutional setting, um, to the point now where I sometimes feel it's all too much. I have to go back to one simple thing. I don't know what that would be. Um, but just feel passionately that our 60 to 80 to 90 years should be the best time of our lives. We
Yeah.
should be in environments that are conducive to growth, and move away from the narrative of deficits and decline. Um, and through that, I've become more and more intrigued with death, and a good death. And maybe that is the next phase for me now, is to really, really do a lot more death work, um, trying to keep death out of the hospital,
Yes.
and I run well, not run. I started 2 years ago. Started a group what we call Death Over Dinner, and we meet every last Wednesday evening of the month over good food and wine and a deep dive into death. We had one this Wednesday evening. And it's incredible that after 2 years, we still have so much to talk about. And, not just the death of people, the death of a business or a relationship or an animal. And the more we explore death, the more we discover life. Um, so yeah, there is so much to explore, to contemplate in life and in death. And it's only as we grow older, I believe, I absolutely, for me, it's a fact that from about 55, 60, 65, that literally our minds open to contemplate our own mortality. And it is only in contemplating our own mortality that I think we discover um, our significance and our insignificance.
Yes.
You know, we will be forgotten. And yet, we are a profound and a significant part of this whole of the whole. But yeah, I find it very, very, very interesting. You said at the beginning how people don't want to talk about religion, and maybe that's also why they don't want to talk about death because of this duality of heaven and hell and sin and all that stuff. But contemplating your own mortality and the only thing, the one and only thing that you can be assured of is that you are going to die.
Yes.
And the fact that so few people can actually sit in and with that knowing and contemplate how will it be for me? What do I think will happen? The physical process of dying is almost unthinkable to the average mind.
Yeah. I was fortunate to, and it sounds a little strange, but I was fortunate to be present at the deaths of my mother and my brother. Um, my brother was ill for years, 10 years, and um, he he had cancer, leukemia, and he went through all the treatment and didn't have cancer any longer, but the treatment left him without an immune system, very immune compromised. And he got an infection in his back. And then but it went undiagnosed because when you go to the hospital with back pain, they send you home. And when he went in for his regular cancer screening every however many months you go, they found that he had an infection, an abscess on his back that they needed to give him antibiotics. And they said that he would be in pain for at least 6 weeks because it was really, really bad because it had gone on for so long. And so he was in terrible, terrible pain when he got pneumonia. And um, to have this pain with pneumonia was just unbearable for him. And he, throughout his process of being ill, he had come to terms with his own death. And he was a very spiritual man, and he has given me a lot of gifts, and ways of thinking, um, just by his presence and his beliefs. But he wanted to die, like he was ready to die. And um, I knew he was in the hospital. I live an hour away, and he called me one Saturday and he said, "Kathy, I'm not going to make it." And I said, "I'll be right there." And I drove to the hospital where he was. Um, and he wasn't taking his pain medicine because he was afraid of swallowing, because he was afraid he would choke. So we got so I so they were like, if he doesn't take his and he's supposed to have an X-ray, and the X-rays are too painful and the whole thing. And being in the knowing something about people swallowing things, I said, what if it was in some applesauce? Would you eat applesauce? He said, sure. So we got him to take his pain medicine through, instead of taking it with water, which I thought, boy, the hospital should have known this. But he did get his X-ray where they said there was more fluid on his lungs. And um, anyway, um, a couple hours later, they came and they said, you have, because of he did get the X-ray, you have fluid on your lungs and we need to drain it. And he said no. And they kind of looked at him and they looked at me, and I was like, don't look at me, look at him. It's his decision, right? So many doctors don't even want to face this death.
Mm.
And he said, I'm stopping treatment. I don't want it. And they never said, you will die. What they said was, um, they talked all the way around it, all the way around it. And I finally said, what you're saying is that he'll die. And they said,
Mm.
yes. And he said, I'm ready. I'm okay with that. And so, he had the oxygen tubes in his nose, and then he had a whole oxygen mask on his face. And he took the oxygen off of his face, and he took the oxygen off of his nose, and he said, I don't want this anymore. And they were like, that'll just make it happen faster. And he was like, that's okay. That's good. He was there. He was ready. And as sad as it was to, think about losing my brother, the the power that he had in making this choice for himself was so strong. And all I could do was admire him in this choice. And, the doctors, there was nothing they could do. And I called people to say this was happening. He said, call these people. And his best friend came and sat on the other side of the bed, and I was there, and we held his hands. And his best friend from college, now he was 64 when he died. So his best friend, they started, telling stories about funny things that happened in their life, and they laughed, and it was just beautiful. And my brother always had a very good sense of humor. But when it came to the point where he was, struggling for each breath, um, he was quiet, and he would stop breathing, and we would look at each other, and then he would take another breath, and he would stop breathing, and we would look at each other. And it's happened for a little while, right? Where we thought that it was his last breath, but it wasn't. Um, And then finally, he opened his eyes, and he looked at me, and he said, I did it. I died. And he like took one more breath, and he was gone. And it was like a victory for him to die. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And accepting death and welcoming it made it um, just made it great. It's a part of life. And his story is living on, right, through me.
Mm.
He's he's not gone. He'll never be gone. And he's with me all the time. His birthday is he was born November 11th, 1111, which I know is a spiritual number and all this stuff, but I look at the clock every now and again, and I 1111, there it is. It shows up for me. It shows up all the time, and I say, "Hi, Jack. How's it going?" You know, and I know that he's there with me, and he's a part of who I am. He's my brother. He's my soul brother, right? And I'll ask him questions. How are you, Jack? Or what should I do now, Jack? So, you know, if death could be a part of life that is welcomed and not feared, we could have different lives, right? I'm not afraid to die anymore. I used to be. I was so
Mhm.
afraid of my mother's death, so afraid. And thank goodness she lived a long time. She died when she was 84, just a few months after my brother died. She died. Um, but she died a beautiful death too. And her last words to me were, I love you, Kathy, you know, and she died that night. It was I am so fortunate to have
Mm.
experienced those two beautiful deaths. Um, that I can't even tell you how how honored I am to have gone through.
Mm. Yeah, death teaches us about life.
Yeah,
And I think it's so sad that we have completely medicalized it. But death teaches us about life.
yeah,
On that note,
yes, yes. Um, I would love to have our next conversation around a death, right?
yeah,
Because I think that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time to do this with me. I really appreciate you. You're amazing.